Welcome to the exclusive home to the Kent Holste Podcast at KentHolstePodcast.com. On the Kent Holste Podcast, you will find interviews, topics to inspire your life, monthly subscription boxes, and ideas and suggestions to live a successful life. Be sure to check out all the Kent Holste Podcast social media sites. There you will see updates on new content and other exclusives. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. All this and more can be found exclusively at the home of the Kent Holste Podcast at KentHolstePodcast.com. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Kent Holste Podcast, exclusively right here on YouTube and KentHolstePodcast.com. I'm so glad that you decided to click this link and join in the conversation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff as well throughout this conversation. Let people know about the mission of positivity and encouragement through communication. In case you haven't been to the website, the blog has a ton of great content. We've got Whether It Brings You Down, What is Love, a Valentine's Day Message, Placing Judgment on Others, Negativity, Friendships and Relationships, Divorce, Struggles we have to not only deal with, but also overcome. There's lots more on the blog portion of the website, along with our interviews where there's been some that have been conducted in the past. I have some scheduled to do in the near future with some great people as well. Also, check out the sports link as well. The Sports Talk is where you can find all sorts of good content like the 2021 NASCAR schedule that I have posted, and as well as the 2021 PBR Professional Bull Riders schedule is on there, along with some great stories that I have to talk about, including WWE, AEW, and NASCAR, along with some NFL talk as well, can all be found on the website. So check it out. There's a lot of great stuff. I'm not going to go through all the great stuff that we have on there, but make sure you go to check it out. You're already here, KentHolstePodcast.com. See what you can find. You might something you like. All right. So with that being said, let's move on to today's show, as we're going to be talking about some great stuff. Now, obviously, within the blog, we've talked about some very difficult, sometimes trying stories. Today, I want to talk about something that's kind of personal to my life. And I think it's the thing that I often feel in my mind, and that is the thought of fear. And I know I've talked about fear before in a past podcast, but since we're starting fresh with everything and all that content has been lost, I figured we might as well just touch back on it and kind of recap, and maybe something new will pop up that I didn't talk about before. Fear is something that was always on my mind and still is sometimes because of being diagnosed with anxiety. And I think anxiety has a lot to do with fear. What do we fear the most about in life? Do we fear about our jobs? Do we fear about our relationships? Do we fear about our kids' lives? Of course we do. We fear about that every single day. And if you say that you don't fear things because you got this manly macho attitude, you're only fooling yourself. And that's the hardest thing I had to admit to myself is I fear. I'm not tough. I'm not this man that can overcome. Yes, Kent is my name, but it's not Clark Kent. You know, I fear a lot of things, and it's not just those three examples. I fear the most death. And I don't know why. It's just something that is always on my mind. And it's, I think, stemming from my grandmother who passed away at a very young age in my life. She wasn't young, but I was. I was only in first grade at the time. I've had a lot of people that were very, very close die in my life at a very young age. I let those things affect my life in a way that I shouldn't because it wasn't necessary. But I feared death because also the biggest thing was a car accident that I was in. And in this car accident, I was in a Geo Metro. And if you are familiar with cars at all, a Geo Metro is this sardine can of a car where literally it should only fit 4 people. 2 in the front, 2 in the back. But somehow, some way, we crammed 5 people in this little car. And if you know this vehicle, there's no back window except for this little tiny, what looks like the size of a makeup mirror, and 2 side windows, which were on the front driver and passenger sides. And, of course, the big front window in the front. Well, anyways, this girl that was driving was going about 60 to 55 miles an hour on this dirt road in the middle of nowhere outside of Casper, Wyoming. And so we were telling this girl to slow down because our heads were hitting the ceilings because we weren't wearing seat belts. And I was sitting behind the driver. Our heads were hitting the ceiling. We turn and we go headed towards the interstate, but still on this side road. It was dirt, like I said. And as we go on this next part of the road where we turn on, we go up this hill. And as we go up the hill, we don't see the bottom part of the road because we were flying. We jumped it. And as we landed, the front axle broke. We swerved 3 or 4 times and then veered to the right-hand side of the ditch where we began to roll 4 times, according to the police reports. I was literally knocked out by the first roll because I remember the first roll and that was it. Next thing I remember is walking outside of the car. It was dark out. I don't remember where I was or who I was with. Backing up a little bit, as the car rolled 4 times, I went over the passenger seat, through the front window, and eventually avoiding the car rolling over me somehow, some way. And my head hit a big boulder, apparently, where I got my softball-sized concussion on the right side of my head. As I stood there, after somehow waking up and walking, I didn't know where I was at. I was confused. And not going to go into the rest of the story, but I was okay. I ended up having back surgery a few years later. When that accident, after the accident happened, reality hit me. Just how short life is. And how I was taking life for granted. Shortly after, my first child was born, Autumn. And that brought in a whole new perspective on life as well. Now, don't get me wrong. This wasn't a complete fix to my previous already hectic life that I chose to live. And I'm putting that very lightly. It opened my eyes to life. But it also scared me because of how life could end at any point, at any moment, when we least expect it. And I guess that's why I fear death, is because my life could have ended in a snap of a finger and I wouldn't even realized it or known until I woke up, which I did, or I could have been walking, holding hands through the gates of heaven with God. And I may sound angry about this because I am, because of the choice that I made back then to live life as a joke. And how often do we treat our life in regards to fear as a joke? because we don't take our life within fear seriously. We are intimidated by fear because we don't want to face it. So how can we change that? How can we change our experience with fear so we can live a more healthy and positive life? It's a good question. In the comment spot, feel free to join in this conversation and put your thoughts on the matter about how and why fear is such a big deal to our life. Why do we let fear affect us? To me, fear is something that I also worry about, because whenever we see something or we're going through something like what Texas just experienced with cold weather and not having power and water, fear began to intensify through all of the people's minds in the state, wondering if their pipes were going to be okay. And for some they were, and for some they weren't. Fear still was there because we were fearing the worst. How can we fear but not let it affect us in a way where that fear turns into a more destructive situation, where we let that beat ourselves so bad that we cannot recover and pull ourselves out? Because when we fear, we lose sleep. We sometimes don't feel like even eating. Are those really things that are going to help the situation by avoiding sleep, even though it's not intentional? Is it really going to solve things by fearing so bad that we can't eat a meal because our stomachs are in a knot? Gotta do something. How do we pull ourselves out of fear? How do we take our minds off of things that are distracting us, feeding into that negativity of fear? I'm not saying all fear is bad, because sometimes our fear can be a good thing. And you might be scratching your head and going, well, how was fear a good thing? Fear can cause us to do things that we don't usually do unless it's out of fear. Prime example, when we have friends or family that are sick or going through issues that are out of our control, we fear for them. And within that fear, what do? The answer to what we should do when we fear is this. We end up praying. Praying is a good thing. Praying helps us get to places and things that we never thought were possible. And I know I've talked about prayer and the power of prayer in previous podcasts as well. It's one of the biggest things I advocate for is prayer, because when we pray, it helps us, brings peace to our minds, because once we're done praying, that sense of fear just ever so slightly goes away. I want to talk about a prime example of what prayer can do in a time of fear. I was working at a job where a young lady was struggling with her recovery. Her recovery was making her fear trying to have visitation with her very own kids. She was worried because of her past that her kids would judge, that they would not appreciate her. So me and a coworker and another coworker were trying to confide with her and let her know that is not true. That is completely false. We tried to motivate her, and we gave her encouragement. We offered to help her. We also, two of us, went outside and we prayed with her. And what did that prayer do by the end? It lifted that fear. It made not just me, but my coworkers feel good inside. And that fear that was in the heart and soul of that person that was hurting inside, that fear went away. That's the power of prayer. That is the power of what you can do to overcome fear, is by prayer. What are other ways that you can overcome fear? Put that in the comment spot below. I think another thing that can overcome fear is the distraction of doing something that you may not be comfortable as well. Is not just talking to a friend or a family member, but talking to a pastor or maybe a therapist who will give you insight on things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily thought about or would go through in a way to understand where that fear is coming from. Having a discussion to work out a game plan to make sure that that fear doesn't overcome you, but you overcome the fear. The biggest thing I've also feared in my life is whether my kids are going to remember me, whether my kids are going to remember the love that I shared through taking them to church, trying to teach them about the love of Christ, taking them to special places, taking them to the ocean, taking them fishing and swimming, taking them to the park. My fear is they're going to resent me. And it doesn't help with the fear because I don't get to talk or see 3 of them. So that fear often stays in my mind. And that fear turns into night terrors. And when I have those dreams, even though they're hard to see, because I miss them so much, I don't want to wake up from them, which doesn't help the situation. How often do you have dreams of your fears? And can you relate with me that when you have these dreams, sometimes they're ones that you just don't want to wake up from because as much as they hurt, they also make you reminisce and miss certain things. Or maybe your fear is over things that have been a destruction in your life. A wrecking ball that tried to knock down a lot of walls and situation in your world that have brought you down to your knees. I've been there. You know, it's not easy dealing with so many things that cause that fear, but also that anxiety that comes with it. Because of my anxiety, it got so bad, I actually went to a doctor and I said, listen, I need medication to help me through this. I seriously think I struggle with anxiety. And the doctor was confused. It was like, what? You're coming to me? I should be the one referring you. But it takes a lot for someone to step up and say, I need help. And that's the other thing you need to keep in mind. When in dealing with your fear, sometimes you need to admit that you need help. And for a long time, I didn't want to admit I needed help with medication. But for a solid 2.5 years now, I've been on medication. I take it daily, and it not only helps with my anxiety, but I have PTSD. I didn't serve in the military. I just had a lot of stuff happen within my last marriage that truly affected my mind in a way where I can't sleep. And also I take medication to help with my ADHD and my depression. And so, yeah, it took a lot for me to admit my fear of admitting that I do have stuff I need to work on in my life. And for some of us, that can be a lot to take in. And for me, it was a huge victory in my book for taking that chance and taking that step in the right direction of overcoming my fear. Now, obviously, I have plenty other fears, like going to the doctor and if they have to do blood work or give a shot. I'm definitely afraid of needles. Now, if you looked at my arms and you saw the tattoos on my arms, you would go, well, how is that possible? Well, if you have tattoos, you understand it's completely different. But, even with the tattoos, I had fear going in and getting my first one. But these tattoos that I have are a symbol of the fear I've had to overcome. My tattoos are a symbol of my faith and my family and my heritage. It's something that I'm very proud of. And don't you think you too should have the ability to be confident and to be content with your life and with your fears? Because fear is something that is normal. It happens. There's no avoiding it. It happens every single day. And the key to your success within your fear is how you deal with it and conquer it. So I encourage you today to take that leap of faith within yourself and believe in yourself and know that there is no fear bigger than what you can accomplish. Because all fear can be dealt with and can be handled. Not always in ways that we want it to be, but we can take a hold of it and try to figure out how to get past it. Now, obviously, my fear of death and my fear of needles is probably one thing that will never change. But it's still there and I can somewhat cope with it. But the fear of my kids, that is something that I have to figure out on a daily basis how to overcome, because new feelings get built up every single day from that. It just doesn't go away because my kids mean the world to me. I love them. They bring a smile to my face because of the memories and the things that they did to my life. Don't let fear conquer you and bring you down. Think about that today. Think about ways that fear impact our lives and share and talk about them in the comment spot. Don't be afraid to talk about this because it is something that is truly important. And I think fear is something that we hide, and it shouldn't be hidden. Some people think fear is a sign of weakness. Fear is not a sign of weakness. We're just weak in general. We are all weak inside. It's not a bash. It's not a thing to bring you down. It's just fact. I'm weak, but with the help of prayer and scripture and positive people that I choose to surround myself with, that's how I overcome my fear. By clearing my head, by going out and doing things like hiking or fishing or camping, going to a NASCAR race, a concert, whatever. Anything to clear your mind, to put aside those feelings and thoughts that aren't healthy, are a positive. But hiding from them is not healthy. So let's talk about it. Anything that you have to share on the topic of fear, feel free to put that in the comment spot and just join in the conversation. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because you never know. The things that you say might help somebody that's listening and viewing the podcast today. And that is the whole purpose of the podcast, is to help encourage people, to build people up. But if you're going to write something that's negative, this is not the place for that. All those comments are going to be deleted, and it might just get you blocked. And I would hate to see that happen. So just be mindful of others and be respectful. Because no matter what, whether you agree with me or what I say, it doesn't give you the right to bash or to cut me down or anybody else down that shares what they're feeling, because this is all stuff that I've been through personally. And I have no reason to make this stuff up or lie, because that's not the purpose of this. I don't do this to just sit at home or wherever and just pat myself on the back. No, I do this because I want to help people. I want to be that person that shares my life experiences, because I've been through a lot. And I don't want people to feel like they're alone. So if you're all for this mission of positivity, encouraging, and lifting up others, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let people know about this podcast. Let people know the good that is in this podcast, the love and the care that is in this podcast. And always remember to think and be positive. Do what you can today to overcome your fears, and not what you can't to overcome them. And I believe in you. Don't you think you should too? And for all those people that you see walking down the street or wherever you're at, whether you're at grocery shopping or at church, and you see someone who has served our country, whether it be military, police, firefighters, people who work with the Coast Guard, whatever. If they've served our country, take 2 seconds to give them an elbow, give them a fist bump, tell them how much you appreciate them. You never know how much that one random act of kindness could affect their life. Be that person today. Be kind to one another. So thank you for listening. I really hope that today's podcast really got you thinking about fear and the possible fear that's in your life and how you can overcome it. And if you have overcome it, share your success with that fear. All right? So have a great day. Have a great evening whenever you're listening to this. I hope that God blesses your day. And I'll see you very soon right here on the Kent Holste Podcast, exclusively on YouTube and the home of the podcast, KentHolstePodcast.com.